The ancient stones of Jerusalem witnessed countless stories throughout millennia, but what unfolded on that distant day would leave a scar deeper than any before. My friend, imagine the very ground trembling beneath your feet, the houses shaking and the wails of families echoing off ruined walls. It was not merely a disaster. It felt like a warning thundered from heaven itself, a sign that destiny was being rewritten before our very eyes. The prophets long foretold such calamities, marking them as critical milestones in God's great prophetic timeline. This will shock you. In the book of Ezekiel, it is written, "In my zeal and fiery wrath I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel." Ezekiel 38:19. This was not a random tremor, but a quake sent with purpose, a shaking that reached into heaven and down to the depths of the earth. People fled into the streets clutching loved ones, searching for sanctuary but finding only dust and chaos. The air filled with cries, prayers, and the haunting sound of stones collapsing. In the words of Isaiah, "You will be punished by the Lord of hosts with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire." Isaiah 29:6. On that day, the air pulsed with an unnatural force, as if reality itself was bending beneath the wrath and sorrow unleashed over Jerusalem. It was the fulfillment of the Markan apocalypse. Jesus himself predicted the destruction of the temple and disaster for Judea, Mark 13. Neighbors became strangers in the flight from disaster. The panic and confusion spilled out into every alley and square, as if the entire city was a stage for a celestial drama. Yet through all this, there lingered a deeper message. This tragedy was more than just a physical shaking. It was the fingerprint of a prophecy, a warning that the time of the end was rumbling closer. As the dust settled, survivors whispered of signs and portents. Those who read the scriptures remembered that such days would come, days when the earth itself would groan beneath the weight of humanity's sin and the irresistible march of divine prophecy. Every trembling stone pointed toward something greater, something looming on the horizon, the coming of the Antichrist, the beast whose rise would set the final stage. For the greatest spiritual battle of all time, stay with me, because the next chapter will reveal how these ancient prophecies intertwine with the shocking events now rocking Jerusalem, and why this disaster may be the very gateway for darkness to rise. The surge of panic and awe after the great earthquake was only the beginning, my friend. The very dust that settled over Jerusalem shimmered with prophecy, as if every grain was woven into the tapestry of the end times. For the survivors, the question echoed in their hearts. Could this disaster be the doorway the scriptures warned about, the threshold leading directly to the rise of the Antichrist? This will shock you. According to Zechariah 14, the future day of the Lord will bring a monumental confrontation against Jerusalem. All nations will gather against the holy city. Jerusalem will be plundered, ransacked, and divided, with half of its people fleeing in terror. Then the Messiah will descend onto the Mount of Olives, splitting it in two, a sign accompanied by a cataclysmic earthquake unlike any before. In the book of Daniel, these prophecies grow starker. Daniel 11:45 reveals that the Antichrist himself will set up his royal tent on the holy mountain, the very heart of Jerusalem. He will present himself as God, enthroned in the temple claiming divinity, and demanding worship from every nation. Can you imagine the city trembling under not just the weight of physical disaster, but the ominous tension of prophetic fulfillment? Streets once filled with laughter and prayer now choked by dread and spiritual uncertainty. The rebuilt temple, the golden centerpiece of faith and history, becomes a battleground as the Antichrist seizes control, halting sacrifices and desecrating what is most sacred. This moment, predicted in Daniel and echoed through Revelation, sets the world's clock ticking with terrifying precision. Listen closely to how the Apostle Paul warned the Thessalonians about this coming figure. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. 2 Thessalonians 2. The shadows deepen as the Antichrist's power grows, not behind closed doors, but in the full light of a desperate world seeking hope among ruins. Against roaring crowds and faltering leaders, false prophets rise with him, drawing every nation into a feverish worship of darkness. The image of the beast, the Antichrist, is exalted above all, and those who refuse to bow face persecution and death. Even as fear grips the city, a remnant remembers the prophecies with trembling lips. For every act of desecration, every blasphemous claim, the scriptures burn with vindication. These days were written long before our generation, and in the whirlwind of chaos, another echo resounds, Daniel's vision of 70 weeks, marked by restoration and then devastation. The timeline carves out a period in which the Antichrist's deception flourishes, but his reign will be short-lived, crushed by the looming arrival of Christ. The earth's trembling is not merely doom. It is a warning and a promise that the battle will end, and justice will flood the world like the rain falling on Jerusalem's scarred stones. In these haunted streets, the people see armies gathering, alliances forged and broken, and the ancient city transformed into the central stage of a cosmic war. Each headline and every tragedy points to the fulfillment of centuries-old prophecies. My friend, the signs are here, woven into disaster and anticipation. The earthquake may have shattered what was, but now the world stands before the rise of the Antichrist. Are you ready to uncover the chilling plans unfolding and the hope hidden in the scriptures? The stage is set for deception and divine intervention, and the clock cannot be stopped. In the next chapter, you'll see the worldwide consequences as prophecy leaps from Jerusalem's dust to shake the whole earth. The terror unleashed in Jerusalem did not stay confined within its ancient walls. My friend, the tremors rippled across the entire world, shaking nations out of complacency and thrusting prophecy into the global spotlight. As news of the great disaster and the rise of the Antichrist broke, no corner of the earth remained untouched by fear, turmoil, and a sense that something unprecedented was unfolding in real time. You won't believe how the chaos quickly spun into a chain reaction of wars, revolutions, disasters, and rampant confusion. The scriptures forewarned of these seismic times. Jesus himself spoke of false messiahs, wars, rumors of war, famine, plagues, and earthquakes in diverse places. Matthew 24:6-8. What stunned the world now was the speed and synchronicity with which every headline seemed to echo the ancient prophecies. The Great Tribulation, the time of unparalleled anguish, had arrived, and the planet itself appeared to groan beneath its weight. As Jerusalem groaned under the Antichrist's sway, global alliances began to splinter and reform in alarming patterns. The world was moving toward a new order, with political and religious powers merging as prophecies described in Revelation 13. Every authority and system scrambled to respond, but the more they grasped for control, the clearer it became that no human power could stem the tide of chaos sweeping the earth. Economies faltered, governments wavered, and despair spread like wildfire, precisely as prophesied. This will shock you. The book of Revelation describes the formation of a worldwide coalition, beastly powers uniting to control commerce, law, and even worship. Revelation 13:16-17. Those who would not bear the mark, who refused allegiance to the Antichrist, faced persecution and exclusion. The cost of resistance climbed day by day, and yet a growing multitude whispered prayers and clung to hope, trusting that God would not abandon his elect, no matter how fierce the darkness. Every natural disaster took on new meaning. Earthquakes, fires, and famine, once tragic but explainable, were now seen as apocalyptic signs fulfilling chapter and verse. Across continents, people remembered the warnings. There will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. Matthew 24:21. Scientists, politicians, and spiritual leaders argued on screens, but hearts everywhere knew. The prophetic clock had begun its final countdown. Scenes of desperation played on every broadcast. Armageddon, that ancient word of dread, returned to daily conversation. Revelations 16 and 19 spoke of a final cataclysmic battle where the armies of darkness would be utterly crushed by the appearance of Christ himself, riding in power. For the powers of evil, it would be the last stand, the day of the Lord that prophets had depicted in trembling tones. And through the chaos, a message repeated itself. The end is not chaos for its own sake, but judgment and hope entwined. God's vengeance would fall against evil, yet mercy and deliverance awaited those who endured to the end. Every calamity was both a warning and a promise, echoing that the upheaval had been written long before by divine hand. Hang on, friend, because as the world quakes and empires fall, The climactic convergence of these events is about to burst forth. The next chapter will thrust you into the singular moment when prophecy and reality collide, and the true magnitude of Jerusalem's disaster is revealed as the prelude to the return of Christ. The hour is darker than ever, but the dawn has already been promised. My friend, the world reached its prophetic apex as the signs converged over Jerusalem. This moment, long described in trembling words by saints and prophets, witnessed the gathering of armies for the final showdown, Armageddon. The darkness that eclipsed Jerusalem now blanketed the earth, as powers and principalities marshaled their forces for a battle that would decide the fate of humanity. You won't believe the intensity. Then the demon spirits gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon, and all the nations of the earth assembled beneath ominous skies to wage war against the return of Christ, Revelation 16:16. Biblical prophecy had warned that the Euphrates would dry up, removing ancient barriers and unleashing the kings of the East for a supernatural confrontation with the armies entrenched around God's holy city. The scriptures paint the scene in strokes of judgment and hope. Heaven itself opened and Christ descended, rider on a white horse, eyes blazing with righteous fury, crowned in glory, with the armies of heaven arrayed behind him, Revelation 19:11-16. The Mount of Olives split open, creating a valley of decision as described in Zechariah 14:4. Just imagine the thunderous footsteps, the cries of warriors, and the clash of cosmic powers as the King of Kings makes his stand. This will shock you. The battle was swift and terrible. Forces aligned with the Antichrist and the beast met their end, dissolved by the presence and word of Christ himself. Revelation proclaims, "Out of his mouth goes a sharp sword that with it he should strike the nations. He treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God." The beast and the false prophet were seized and cast alive into a lake of fire, Revelation 19:20. All those who bore their mark fell defeated and judged, as the armies of heaven cleansed the scarred earth. For all the devastation, the story did not end there. Armageddon was not merely destruction, it was the prelude to redemption and renewal. God's sovereignty, long hidden behind centuries of rebellion and doubt, manifested in an overwhelming victory over all evil. Jerusalem, the trembling epicenter, became the site of restoration, a new dawn breaking as darkness fell back. The nations, now silenced and awed, witnessed the fulfillment of every word previously mocked. Christ's return was not a myth, but a lightning bolt of truth and justice. My friend, this final battle was a spiritual and literal collision, the proof that the prophecy written in ancient scrolls had come alive in the streets and valleys of our time. The Antichrist's reign crumbled to dust. Hope soared above despair. The chapter closed not only with triumph, but with the promise of peace, lasting justice, and a world finally set free. Stay close, for the ending approaches. In the final chapter, you will see how this victory leads to the coronation of Christ, the renewal of creation, and the proof that every prophecy has been fulfilled before those who dared to watch and believe. When the final battle subsided and the armies of darkness were vanquished, Jerusalem stood trembling in the aftermath, a city both broken and sanctified, a planet forever changed. The sound of war was replaced by a supernatural hush, the anticipation of a new world settling into every heart. In that silence, the magnitude of Armageddon's fulfillment became clear. You won't believe how the prophecies aligned with astonishing precision. Christ, victorious and radiant, established his reign from Jerusalem. Satan was bound for 1,000 years, and the long-awaited age of peace, the millennium, unfolded like morning after a night of unthinkable terror. The survivors, who had trembled through judgment, now witnessed scenes never before seen. Nations streaming to worship in Jerusalem, the land itself transformed, and the curse of war lifted from the earth. As Isaiah writes, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." It's on Isaiah 2:4. But this peace was not just absence of conflict, it was the total fulfillment of every divine promise. The blindness of Israel was healed, and those who had once doubted now saw with unveiled eyes that the Messiah was the very one they had pierced. returning in love and power. The world entered an era of restoration. The land flourished, longevity increased, and joy replaced sorrow for all who worshipped the King. This will shock you. Even the aftermath bore witness to prophecy's detail. The armies that had come against Jerusalem were destroyed so completely that it took 7 months to bury the dead, and 7 years to gather the spoils left behind. Ezekiel 39:9-16. The world remembered the cost of rebellion, and the earth itself was cleansed from its centuries of blood and betrayal. Revelation 21-22 revealed this moment as the inauguration of a new creation. The New Jerusalem, gleaming with divine glory, descended as God made his dwelling with humanity. He will wipe away every tear. There will be no more death or mourning. For the old order of things has passed away. Revelation 21:4. Light, not shadow, became the city's legacy, and every promise spoken by the prophets stood vindicated. My friend, the disaster that began with a trembling city ended in unfathomable restoration. The stages of prophecy are now history, and eternity dawns with hope for all who watch and endure. The clock has struck the final hour, but the kingdom of the Lamb is eternal, and the miracle of Jerusalem's survival proves forever that the word of God cannot fail. Let the judgment, the deliverance, and the peace echo in your soul, for what was once only a prophecy has now become the world's greatest reality. Blessed are the people who know the joyful sound and respond. Pes 89:15. If this blast awakened you, subscribe and turn on the bell to stay watchful with us. Share this and leave your prayer request in the comments. Between fear and hope, we choose the word. Matthew 24:35. Stay with us, the next blast could come at any moment.